Hi guys, I have here sitting on my bench the waveform generator RIGOL, or how seems to be the right pronunciation, RIGOL DG1022Z. In the first part of this video I will be unboxing and going through the content of the box, but since there are quite a few unboxing videos of this unit on YouTube, I will speed up most of parts of this unboxing process and put some background music. If you guys don't want to see the unboxing, just try to find out where starts part 2 and jump straight into it. In the part 2, I'll be doing a review of the unit. Okay, I have everything already settled here in the workbench. I will be using a oscilloscope RIGOL or RIGOL 1024Z. That's an entry-level unit, but has got 4 channels and it's a good value for the money. There are plenty of reviews of this unit on YouTube. This waveform generator is also entry-level, but can go up to 25 MHz. Some people asking what is the point of using waveform generator hooked up to oscilloscope. For this kind of video, a review, I think that's the best way to see the output of waveform generator is using a scope. In future videos I can show you this unit in a practical way in some circuits, but for this review let's stick with this way and see this unit in action. Okay guys, let's turn the unit on and see how long it takes to boot up. The boot time is about 9 seconds. I tried the unit for a couple minutes before I started recording. If you guys have had any experience with waveform generator, you guys shouldn't have any problem to use this unit. It's quite intuitive. So the first thing we note here is the LCD display, 3.5 inches with the graphical interface. On top of the screen we have the channel 1 and on the bottom the channel 2. Here in the left hand side the parameters for both channels, and in the right hand side we have the menu. And to change those parameters we can use the soft keys and change the parameters we want. So here now we have for channel 1 a sine wave, so you can see here that sine it's on, and the frequency it's 1 kilohertz, and amplitude of 5 volts peak to peak. If I want to change the parameters for channel 2, I just press this button, so it's swap between channels. So now I can change channel 2. For sake of demonstration, let's use channel 1, but whatever we do for channel 1 we can also do for channel 2, just using this button. Now you can see that the output is off for both channels. To enable the output, we can use for channel 1 this button, and for channel 2 this one. So let's enable the output. Let's adjust our scope. So you can see now on your screen a sine wave with the frequency of 1 kilohertz. To increase the frequency, we can use the knob. So clockwise we increase and counterclockwise we decrease. For example, if you want a frequency of 4.5 kilohertz, we just rotate the knob. With the direction key, we move the cursor for the next digit. So now we can go all the way up to 4.5 kilohertz. I can also use the numerical keyboard. So for example, if I want 15.7 kilohertz, I just put the number here and select the unit I want. So 15.7 kilohertz. Let's adjust the scope. So there you go. You can see on the screen sine wave with 15.7 kilohertz. The next parameter for this waveform is amplitude. So now I have 5 volts peak to peak amplitude, so I can decrease or increase the amplitude. The amplitude depends on the frequency. Up to 10 megahertz, it can go all the way up to 20 volts peak to peak. But if I select a frequency higher than 10 megahertz, the maximum amplitude I can get is 10 volts peak to peak. For example, let's go back, select frequency, and let's put, for example, 12 megahertz. So now it says that I have maximum, the upper limit for this frequency is amplitude of 10 volts peak to peak. Let's adjust the scope. So there we see, let's adjust here. You see the waveform 12 megahertz and 10 volts peak to peak. Let's go back to 15 kilohertz. Let's adjust the scope again. The offset also depends on the amplitude, so let's select offset. With 10 volts peak to peak, the offset can get maximum it's 5 volts offset. If I decrease the amplitude, I can have higher values for offset. For example, if I go here for 20 volts peak to peak, the maximum offset is 0, so I have no offset for 20 volts peak to peak. Let's put back to 5 volts peak to peak. So now offset, I can go all the way up to 7 volts or minus 7 volts. I can also have a phase, so I can phase the waveform. For example, now it's 0, so I have no phase. I can phase the waveform in 180 degrees, for example. So now you see that the waveform is phased in 180 degrees if you compare with the channel 2. Let's go back to 0. At any time, if the channel 1 and channel 2 are not in phase, I can use this option to align the phase of channels. The other things, if I use the page down, the other thing I have to sine wave, it's the harmonics or harmonics. So let's turn it on. So now I have, let's increase a little bit the scale here on the scope. So now I have harmonics on, and I can change the parameters for harmonics. here I have 2 harmonics, and the type is even. So let's go back, let's change, for example, let's change the order. So let's get here on the screen 5 harmonics. Let's increase here, let's change the trigger so you can see well. So here you have now 5 harmonics for this waveform, and I can also change the type odd, or I can even select the user option where I can change specific harmonics. So the first one I can change, so it's binary, so I have 0 or 1 for every harmonic. So the second one, for example, let's change the second one on. So now I have the second harmonic on. Let's use the direction key. So the next one, let's leave it off. Let's the third one on, fourth on, the fifth one 0, and so on. So you can use a specific user option to turn on or off specific harmonics. So if I go back here, I can select, for example, the harmonic number 4, for example, okay, and I can change the amplitude for this harmonic 2. So you see that I can change the amplitude, and I can also change the phase for this harmonic. If I try, for example, 5, let's go back, that's here in parameters, typed user. If you guys see the harmonic 5, it's 0. So let's go back in there and let's try to change the harmonic 5. So amplitude, so I change here, and you see that here in the graph it's increasing, and let's go back in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is on. 5 is actually on. So let's try to change 6. So 6 is off. So let's change the amplitude. So I'm changing here, so you guys see that there is no change in the graph because the harmonic 6 is off. So basically is that for harmonic. So now let's go back and turn the harmonic off. So I have now my sine waveform again. The next waveform is a square wave. I have the same parameters, so I can change in the same way, but now I have a duty cycle. That for sine I don't have. But if you try to go the page down, I don't have harmonic for square waves. So let's change here the duty cycle, for example. So now I have a duty cycle of 50%. I can go all the way up to, if I have 100% duty cycle, it's going to be a DC sine high full time. I guess the duty cycle here depends on the frequency. So let's see the maximum we can get with in this frequency. Should be something really close to 100, but not 100. So I can go all the way up to 99.9, 4, and now 7. If I change the frequency, so let's select the frequency and let's put a lower frequency, for example 5 kHz. So now let's change the duty cycle again. I guess we can go a bit higher. You see here we can go all the way up to 99.982%. So let's go back to 50%, and in the same way all the way down. All the other parameters are the same as we did for sine wave. The next waveform is ramp. the same parameters, but I have here symmetry. And let's adjust a little bit the screen of the scope. A ramp with 50% symmetry is a triangle waveform. If I go all the way, let's keep 5 kilohertz, so let's select symmetry. If I go all the way down to 0%, now I have a sawtooth, and all the way up to 100% I have a sawtooth in the other direction. Now let's try the pulse. The pulse waveform is similar to the square wave, but we have the options of leading and trailing that you can change. If you click here, you can see that you can change the lead. Now it's 20 nanoseconds, so you can increase or decrease the pulse lead. Okay, now we have noise. For noise we have amplitude and offset, no other parameters, so you can change those parameters here. And the really interesting part of this waveform generator is we have a bunch of arbitrary waveforms. If you click here, you can see that in the same way you have all the parameters here, but now it says which waveform is selected. So all the parameters here are the same, but if I go page down here, I can select waveforms. So I have DC waveform, and I can also have built-in waveform or stored waveforms. In stored waveforms I can load some waveforms saved on the disk or in the USB device. But let's go back and let's see the built-in waveforms. I have here I think it's almost 106 different waveforms in this built-in in this unit, and they are divided in 5 different categories. So the first one is common, so that's the one that's selected now. With the knob or with the keys, direction keys, I can swap between waveforms. So let's select another one. For example, I have here for common waveforms we have 13 waveforms, so let's select star up and descending. So to select, just press here and there we go. So let's move a little bit the trigger so you can see the waveform on your screen. So here you have a bunch of other waveforms, and to select is just pressing here. Let's change the trigger a little bit so you can see better this waveform. There we go. And if you go back, you have all those waveforms. So I have 11 different waveforms to engine. Let's select this one. Let's move the trigger a little bit again. So okay, there we go. Let's see now medical. We have a cardiogram and a lot of others. So I have 21 different medical waveforms, a bunch of EEG, ECG. Let's select one of those, so for example this one, and there we have. So the next category is auto electric. So for example the first one is ignition. So if I select, you see ignition waveform on your screen, and yeah, a bunch of ISO waveforms and 11 waveforms for this category. So I also have maths. Let's select this one for example. Let's change a little bit the trigger. So here you can see the Bessel G waveform. And that's for this category. We have 16 different waveforms. So that's it for arbitrary waveforms. Of course you also can have waveform comes from the USB port of the device, the unit, so you can plug in your computer, you can develop your own waveform. I guess we have also an option here to, let's see where I can have this, edit waveform. So for example, I can change a waveform with mega samples and high level, low level, and the number of points. Okay, and the offset and the other options. So now let's see the function keys. So let's go back to sine. So we have a sine wave on the screen. I think I went through most of options we have in here. So the first option we have here is the modulation. Now we have a modulation on the screen. The type of modulation we have now, it's AM. We also have FM, PM, and a lot of others, including PWM. So now I have selected AM waveform. So let's go back. Let's, for example, change the frequency. Let's put here a frequency of 1 megahertz. So let's change a little bit the. So now we have a modulation of 1 megahertz frequency. I can also change the depth. Now it's let's change here, so can go all the way down, and here it's 100%. You can go all the way up to 120%. So let's leave here. We can change also the source, internal or external. In the next video I'm going to show you the external modulation for this unit, but now let's keep using the internal modulation. I can change the shape. Now it's a sine wave, and the modulation is sine, but you can have square. At this frequency you guys are not going to see much difference, but let's try to increase. So you can see inside of the wave that you have a square modulation. So let's change again to, you can have triangle, and all the others waveforms include arbitrary waveforms. So let's go back to sine. Let's change here the scope again, and trigger option, so you can see better on the screen. Okay, let me see if I have other option that I didn't talk about. I think that's it for the modulation. Basically, that's what I can show now. In another video I can show you the external modulation. So let's then turn the modulation off. That's something really interesting. You have sweep options here. Let me change a little bit the scale on the scope, so you can see that the sine wave is sweeping. And here you have the time. So let's increase the time. So now you can see that's slowing down. It's 3 seconds. That's 5 seconds. Let's go back to 1 second, so you can show you other options. We have the return option. Let me show you the return option. So return time, if I put here for example 1 second as well, so let's use the keyboard and put 1 second. So now we have the waveform going in one direction 1 second, the other one also 1 second. You can change the start point. Now it's starting 100 Hz and stopping 1 kilohertz, so you can change those frequencies. And you also can change the mark. Now it's off. You can have a mark on and select the frequency where you want to have the mark on. I can also have a trigger, internal or external. So if you select this option, you can select the source of trigger. Now it's an internal source. You can show you in the future videos also the option of external trigger. So let's go back and just show you those options that start and hold. So I can hold, for example, in 1 second in the start. So it's holding 1 second in the start, and let's now go back to 0, and now let's hold the stop point. So also 1 second. So now it's gonna hold in there and keep going. So basically that's it. You have of course different type of sweeping. Now it's linear. I can have log, and then I can also have step. Let's change here the stop time. Let's put 0 so you guys can see. Sorry, let's go back here. Stop hold 0 so you guys can see better these options. So that's the step option. So let's change again to linear. So basically that's it for the sweep option. You also can have here, let me adjust a little bit the screen of the scope. You can burst a waveform. Basically you have here one cycle, so you can have, for example, 2 cycles. Okay, so now we have 2 cycles in there. I can also have 3 cycles, for example, and so on. So I can change the period of the burst. I can also have a trigger, internal or external, in the same way, and delay. Can change the delay in, for example, 1 second. The upper limit, so let's select here, and there we go. So basically it's that's what you have for the burst option. So now let's see, the next option is the store option. So here you can see the disk of the unit. I have nothing saved in the disk. You can also use external USB, and when it loads, so USB device detected, you can see the sign here that shows that you have a USB inserted. And now in the disk we can see D, that's our USB. Of course I have just a bunch of other things in my USB, but I haven't saved anything in the USB device. So basically we can save something in the USB, read something from the disk or USB, also copy, pass, delete, or create a new folder. Basically that's it for the store options. Last to be the last one, the utility options, because here you have a bunch of things. Basically you have here the channel setup, so you can change all those parameters in the same way, just selecting here. So you can change, for example, channel setup here, output, and for example here impedance. If I change the impedance, I can change the impedance to high or a specific load, 50 ohms or other values. So let's go back to high, and basically that's it for impedance. So let's go back in here. So I also have coupling setup, so here I have all the options we can change. Let's go back. We have if I make any modification for one channel, I can copy the modifications using this option, so from channel 1 to channel 2 or vice versa. So I can copy also from channel 2 to channel 1. I can reset the full configurations for the unit here, so restore all the instrument settings to the factory defaults. So let's cancel. I haven't changed anything, but let's cancel that. I also can change the language, So here I have a bunch of language. English is the default language, and you can select others. So I have here German, Portuguese, and other languages. And in the next page I have system info. So let's click in here. So it says the model of the unit, the serial number, the version of the software. I don't know if that's the last one. I haven't updated anything or installed anything. So let's go back, and I also have, I'm gonna leave this option for to be the last one. So I have also I/O configuration. So here I can change to the GPIB, LAN configurations, etc. Let's go back. I have the print setup. For example, if I want to save the screen of the unit, I can select the format of the file between PNG and BMP. Can select this option, print on and off, and that's it for print. Here I have the test and calibration option, and let's go back and let me show you the system options. So for the system options, I have the power on default, or I can load the less options. If I change the parameters for channel 1 or 2, for example, and I want those parameters to come when I turn the unit on, so I just put in here, I just leave default. So every time the unit turns on, it's gonna come in the default parameters that you can also set. For example, now it's set to 1 kHz and 5 volts peak-to-peak amplitude sine wave. So you can change the clock source. Now it's internal. You can change for external. The number format for people that in other countries that use comma instead of dot, you can change it here. The beep on and off, screen save on and off, and something really interesting is the display option. Now, yes, I can also change the brightness and contrast of the display, but I can also use a custom graphic interface or display mode. I can change the display mode. For custom, I can just click in here and open a file from the disk or from the USB device and load this custom graphic interface. But I can also change the display mode. The default of the units are dual, so I mean the unit turns on with both channels on the screen and the parameters on the left hand side. But I can have dual with just graphs and we don't have the parameters. So now the screen is going to be like this. Let's change, for example, channel 2 to square wave so you can see the difference. So now you see that the channel 1 here on top and channel 2, but you don't have the parameters here in the left hand side. Or you can go back in there and system, display, and they can have a single view. In a single view, I have just one channel on the screen. Now it's channel 2. That was the last one I was editing. So to go to channel 1, I just press in here. So now I have channel 1 on the screen. I think for me the best option is choose dual with the parameters on the screen. So dual and parameters. Okay, the last option I'd like to show you is the counter. If I press here counter, of course I don't have a source in here now, but you can see that's open counter interface in here, and you can see the main option, main item here. It's the frequency. You can change that, so you can have, for example, period instead of frequency, or duty cycle, or whatever. So let's go back to frequency. Another thing we can change is the gate time. So if you see this LED here, it shows the time the counter is working. So if I change here, for example, now it's 1 millisecond, I can change for 10 milliseconds. So you can see that it's slowed down 100 milliseconds. So it's slower. So let's go back to 1 millisecond. Let's go back to the main menu. I can also turn the statistics on and off. Now it's off. If I turn it on, you see a bunch of information data in here, and you can also change the display. Now it's a digital display. I can also have a curve. So now I have a curve display. I can change the trigger level, coupling. Now it's AC coupling, and auto in this option here. Something also interesting is if you go back to the main screen, since the count is on, now I have information for the channel 1, channel 2, and also the counter. So you have all the information you need on the screen of your unit. Let's turn the counter off. And here we go back to the main screen. We also have here the help button. If you press help and any other button in the front panel, we can see the help showing the information about the selected key. Here you can page down or go all the way to the bottom or all the way to the top. You can also help button. So here you see all the content of the help. Another thing that I forgot to show you is here in the utility. You can have the channel setup, output setup. I can have the output normal, or I can also have the output inverted. Mode, I can also have mode gated or normal. Basically, that's all the information I would like to show you in this video. Okay guys, I think that's it. In the next video I want to show you the software of this unit and also the external functions, trigger, modulation, etc. So hope you guys like the video. If yes, please thumbs up, and I will catch you next time.